Tonight, St. Louis police are investigating the death of a 2-year-old boy in North City as a homicide. The medical examiner's office now says the toddler died from strangulation.
It was the night of October 27th. Bre'Yon Wells, a 2-year-old boy, was rushed to Cardinal Glennon Hospital in St. Louis, completely unresponsive. Doctors and nurses fought to stabilize a tiny body that had known nothing but love. His mother, Bianca Wells, arrived moments later, disbelief written across her face. And the person Bre'Yon trusted the most, someone she believed could protect him, watch over him while she worked, was the very person at the center of this tragedy. Nico Cotton, 21, a close friend and her boyfriend, was now facing allegations that would shake an entire family, a community, and everyone who hears this story. But how could this happen? How could a home, a place that should have been safe, become a scene of unimaginable loss? These questions lingered in the minds of every person who would learn of this story, and they are the questions we will follow as we uncover every detail, every decision, and every heartbreaking moment that led to the loss of a little boy who had his entire life ahead of him. But before we begin, if you find this video interesting, please give it a like at the end and tell me what you think about the case. It really helps the channel. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe for more. Thank you. This video is created solely for educational and documentary purposes. It does not endorse, glorify, or condone any of the criminal actions or individuals described in this case. Viewer discretion is advised. St. Louis, a place with a long history, proud neighborhoods, brick homes lined shoulder to shoulder, and communities that held tight to one another even when the headlines didn't always show the full picture. On the north side is the Mark Twain neighborhood, quiet in appearance, familiar to the families who had lived there for years, and like many parts of the city, carrying both resilience and struggle at the same time. Now St. Louis had a reputation, and for years it had ranked high in national violent crime statistics, so outsiders often reduced it to numbers and headlines. However, the reality was more layered than that. In 2025, the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department reported that overall crime had actually declined by roughly 16% compared to the previous year, and homicides had fallen to one of the lowest levels the city had seen in over a decade. That meant progress was happening, and city officials pointed to reductions in shootings and violent offenses as signs of change. But even with those improvements, the rate of violent crime still remained higher than the national average, so the sense of vulnerability had not fully disappeared. And that is important to understand, because statistics tell one story, but streets tell another. Numbers may fall year over year, but when tragedy strikes a single household, when neighbors gather in confusion behind yellow tape, those percentages do not soften the blow. So while St. Louis was seeing improvement on paper, families in certain neighborhoods still felt the weight of instability, and children still depended on the adults around them to keep them safe. But this story is not just about a city with a complicated crime history, and it was not just about statistics trending up or down, but about a child, about trust, and about what happens behind closed doors when the people meant to protect fail to do so. And as the investigation unfolded, St. Louis would once again find itself confronting a tragedy that numbers alone could never explain.
Why do you look like a grown man? No!
Bre'Yon Wells was just 2 years old, but he carried a joy and energy that seemed far beyond his years. He had a smile that could light up a room and a laugh that made anyone who heard it stop and listen. He was curious about everything around him, always exploring and always discovering something new. His godmother, LaToya Johnston, remembered him vividly, and she would often say he was always smiling. He never met a stranger. He loved riding the metro. Those words painted a picture of a boy who was open, vibrant, and full of love.
Hey, hey, hey! Shake it.
His mother, Bianca Wells, was only 19 when Bre'Yon was born, young but devoted, navigating the challenges of parenthood with determination and care. But life for Bianca was not without its difficulties. Support was limited, and she often had to balance work, school, and the responsibility of raising a child practically on her own. She sought guidance when she needed it, leaned on friends and family when she could, and cherished every moment with her son, knowing that he was her world. And it was this trust and love This hope and belief that the world could be safe for her little boy, that set the stage for the day that would change everything. October 27th began like any other day in the Wells household. Bianca kissed Bre'Yon goodbye, adjusted her bag over her shoulder, and reminded him to play safely while she was gone. She left for work trusting Nico Cotton, her boyfriend, to watch her son, believing that he would be the protective presence every parent hopes for. Nico had insisted he could handle it, claiming to be the sole caregiver for the day, and Bianca, reassured by his confidence, nodded and left. Bre'Yon stayed behind, cheerful and full of energy, unaware of the decisions adults were making around him. Hours passed, quiet hours punctuated by the ordinary sounds of a toddler playing. But as the evening settled in, something went wrong, something that no one could have predicted. Around 10:40 p.m., an emergency call shattered the night. Someone reported that Bre'Yon was unresponsive, and the sound of urgency rippled through the Mark Twain neighborhood. Paramedics rushed to the home, and within minutes, they were working to revive the 2-year-old. Nico remained at the scene, claiming responsibility and insisting that he had been caring for Bre'Yon alone, but the situation escalated quickly beyond explanation. Neighbors watched in shock as first responders carried the child from the home to the ambulance. At Cardinal Glennon Hospital, the medical staff took over, and doctors attempted to stabilize Bre'Yon. But despite their best efforts, the young boy could not be saved. He was pronounced deceased, and the weight of the tragedy began to settle over the room. Family members arrived shortly afterward, and the questions came rushing with it. How could this happen? Who could let something like this unfold? The St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department was notified and quickly assumed control of the investigation. Officers canvassed the scene, documented every detail, and began interviewing adults present in the home. Nico Cotton, the man Bianca had trusted completely, became the focus almost immediately. Every statement, every movement, and every interaction was scrutinized, and the reality that the 2-year-old's day had taken a devastating turn began to emerge. The police were now tasked with piecing together what had happened, and the story of Bre'Yon's last hours was only just beginning to unfold. So, the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department began combing through every detail of the evening, and the first critical piece came from the medical examiner's office. The report was horrifying. Bre'Yon had suffered multiple internal injuries, including a lacerated liver, and there were signs of SA. The official cause of death was listed plainly: homicide from multiple internal and asphyxial injuries. When Bianca Wells received the call confirming the results, her grief became unbearable. The police initially questioned all adults present in the home that evening, including Nico Cotton, but at first they were released.
One Northside pastor is sharing his concerns. St. Louis police say shortly after 10:30 Monday night, they first got a call for help after a 2-year-old boy was found unresponsive near Thekla and North Kings Highway in the Mark Twain neighborhood. Police then got a second call about 5 miles away near Interstate 70 and St. Louis Avenue. Investigators say emergency responders went to the second location and took the toddler to a hospital where he died.
An innocent child. I'm just finding out about it.
The Thekla location is just down the street from North City Church of Christ. Rodney Weekly is the pastor.
You know, it right in my own backyard. You know, I just hear something like this. It's just sad.
Police say 2 adults were with the child when emergency responders rushed him to a hospital. Again, officers questioned the pair before releasing them. Investigators have not said if the 2 are related to the toddler.
I just find it just horrible to see. Unfortunately, things like this is going to keep happening until we hold people accountable.
Wednesday, the medical examiner's office said it found the child had evidence of strangulation, among other injuries. The child's cause of death is now ruled a homicide. After their Bible study, Pastor Weekly and his wife prayed for the child, his loved ones, and their neighborhood.
My heart goes out to them. I can't say that enough. If we can just come together, work together as a community, as a church, as a group of people, and just put an end to all of this. Hopefully we can get to the bottom of it.
But the scene did not immediately yield answers, and officers had to dig deeper to understand how a happy 2-year-old child could be found in such a state.
Just hours ago, St. Louis police confirmed that this child's death is being investigated as a homicide. They say it came after the medical examiner found signs that the toddler had been strangled. The first call for help came in Monday night on Thekla Avenue near Kings Highway in North St. Louis. Not long after that, there was another call to police at I-70 and St. Louis Avenue about the same unresponsive child. Emergency crews responded to that location and took the child to the hospital where he was pronounced dead. The toddler has since been identified as 2-year-old Bre'Yon Wells. Again, the medical examiner says the toddler had signs of strangulation and other injuries. We followed up with police, and they've since revealed that the 2 adults that were with Wells Monday night are not his parents, and that the house where the call came in around 11 p.m. is not where he lived. They also say the 2 adults were known to the child's mother. As of Wednesday night, no one has been arrested or charged in this child's death. Make sure to stay with Fox 2 for updates. Reporting downtown, Max Deeknight, Fox 2 News.
Then came October 30th. After 2 days of intense investigation, Nico Cotton walked into the headquarters of the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department and turned himself in. He admitted that he had become frustrated while caring for Bre'Yon, and he acknowledged that he handled the toddler roughly. He described striking the child and applying pressure in ways that caused severe internal injuries. When the confession was documented officially, so too were the legal charges that prosecutors filed shortly afterward. The list was clear and comprehensive, reflecting the severity of what had been alleged: second-degree murder for causing the death of a child without evidence of premeditation, but with clear intent to harm; forcible sodomy, indicating a sexual act performed by force or coercion; statutory sodomy, recognizing sexual contact with a minor by definition of age; child resulting in death, a charge that made explicit the connection between the assault and the fatal outcome. Each count was supported by medical reports, the recorded statements, and the timeline investigators had established. Bianca Wells and LaToya Johnston were left to confront both grief and disbelief. How could someone they trusted, someone who had been invited into their home and their lives, have caused this? Nico was 21 years old at the time, and he was described in reports as Bianca Wells' close friend or boyfriend, someone who had been around long enough to be considered familiar, comfortable, and safe. He was not Bre'Yon's father, and he was not a licensed caregiver, but he had access to the child because he had access to Bianca, and in many households, that line becomes blurred without anyone realizing how much is at stake. Bianca had given birth to Bre'Yon when she was just 19 years old, and by the time of his death, she was still navigating early adulthood, work responsibilities, and motherhood at the same time. Bre'Yon's biological father had already passed away, so the safety net that might have existed through co-parenting simply was not there, and that absence mattered. But Bianca wasn't totally free. She was charged with 1 count of endangering the welfare of a child.
An update to another tragic story involving a young child. Another person now charged after this toddler, 2-year-old Bre'Yon Wells, died. Bre'Yon's mother, Bianca Wells, now facing 1 count of endangering the welfare of a child, resulting in death. According to the probable cause statement, the mother left her son in the care of a person who she knew, based on his prior conduct, posed a substantial risk to the child. That person being referred to is Nico Cotton there on your screen. Last month, he turned himself in to police. According to court documents, Cotton admitted to sexually assaulting and strangling 2-year-old Bre'Yon. He faces multiple charges, including second-degree murder, forcible sodomy, use of a child, resulting in death.
As investigators dug deeper into Bre'Yon's case, they didn't just focus on that single night. They looked at the bigger picture, at patterns that child safety experts had been studying for years. And what they found made the situation even more disturbing. Research had shown that when very young children were brought to the hospital with injuries, almost a quarter of the time, those injuries were not accidents. They were caused intentionally, and the risk wasn't spread equally among all caregivers. When a male adult was in charge, especially someone who wasn't the child's biological father, the likelihood of jumped dramatically. In fact, when children were left with a mother's boyfriend or another unrelated male adult, studies found that over 90% of injuries in that group were classified as not accident. Investigators looked at similar cases in hospitals across the country and saw the same pattern. Children under the care of a partner or step-parent often suffered more serious injuries than those with their own parents. And it wasn't just about who was present. It was also about familiarity. Caregivers who were stepping in for the first time or who weren't part of the child's daily routine were far more likely to be involved when an injury occurred. These numbers didn't mean that every boyfriend or every male caregiver was a threat. but they did reveal a hard truth. Children left in the care of an adult who was not their parent and not part of their usual life faced a significantly higher risk. And for Bre'Yon, that context added a layer of tragedy that investigators couldn't ignore. His safety had been entrusted to someone who, statistically, represented a higher risk than almost anyone else in his life.
The godmother of 2-year-old Bre'Yon Wells is speaking out tonight. Police say the toddler was murdered last week in North St. Louis.
21-year-old Nico Cotton has since been charged with murder and sex crimes connected to the toddler's death. Fox 2's Max Deeknight joins us now. Max, Wells' godmother told you she is absolutely crushed.
Yeah, Mandy, Shirley, that's right. 42-year-old Latoya Johnston told us she loved Bre'Yon like he was one of her own. The mother of four says she was like a grandma and mom to the toddler and his young mother, and she says his death has left her absolutely heartbroken.
Latoya Johnston, his godmother, spoke about him not as a statistic or a news headline, but as someone she had held in her arms, someone she had watched grow from a baby into a curious, laughing toddler.
This is a pain I wouldn't wish on anyone in the world.
Latoya Johnston says her connection with 2-year-old Bre'Yon Wells was instant. She says she first started taking care of him when he was just 3 months old after feeling called to help the boy and his young mom, who was just 19 at the time.
He's always smiling. He's never met a stranger. He would sit on the Metro bus and wave at people as they came on. He loved riding the Metro.
Last Monday, Johnston got a call that she says will forever change her life.
His mom called me screaming and said, "Mom, you got to get to Cardinal Glennon. They just said Bre'Yon is dead." And my heart literally stopped, and I was like, "What do you mean? They said he's dead?"
She said he was like her own child, that his smile had the power to calm a room, and that his absence had left a place inside her heart that nothing could fill. Her voice carried the weight of someone who had loved deeply and lost something irreplaceable.
21-year-old Nico Cotton, a friend of Bre'Yon's mom, was left to babysit the 2-year-old. He now faces charges of second-degree murder and sex crimes after medical examiners found evidence the boy was strangled. Johnston says Bre'Yon's mother left the boy with someone she thought she could trust because she needed to work.
Right now, we just need prayers, and we just need everyone to just give us grace. Give his mom grace. She's going through enough. She's blaming herself enough. Trust me, you can't make her feel any worse than she already feels.
Johnston says she will always carry Bre'Yon, who she called Duty, in her heart. She says if she could talk to him one last time, she would say,
"I'm sorry that this happened to you. I'm sorry that this monster ever came in your life. And I just love you."
Johnston tells us she was getting over a recent hospital stay last week, and that was why Wells' mom didn't reach out to her for help babysitting. She says she wishes she had known that she needed that help. Shirley.
For Bianca Wells, the grief was coupled with guilt. She replayed that day, that decision, over and over in her mind. She wondered about the moments she had taken for granted, the times she had believed that trust was enough. And though she spoke openly about her heartbreak, she also offered a message of caution. She told other parents to support one another, to be vigilant, to look twice at the choices they made for their children's care. She said, "Support your family, be there for them, because you could be like me and have nothing." Those words were not just a plea, they were a reflection born out of grief, shaped by an experience no parent should have to endure. And the community felt it too. Teachers at Bre'Yon's preschool remembered his bright eyes. Neighbors spoke of a little boy who waved at everyone on the street. Friends gathered to release balloons in his honor, blue and white rising into the sky like the hopes they once had for him. Their sorrow was not abstract. It was personal, woven into the fabric of every corner of that neighborhood where he had lived and played. In times like this, it became impossible to separate the individual tragedy from the broader context in which it unfolded. There were larger lessons to be drawn, especially to understand the conditions that make children vulnerable in the first place. People spoke about babysitter safety, about the difference between trusting someone and verifying that they are prepared to care for a child. They talked about the tension between convenience and caution, and about how often well-meaning parents find themselves without support systems, but still hoping everything will be all right. and there was also discussion about the risks that come with young, inexperienced caregivers. Researchers had noted long before this case that age and lack of experience could correlate with increased risk of abuse or injury. Not because youth equals danger, but because inexperience means less familiarity with how to manage a toddler's needs, behaviors, and reactions. In Bre'Yon's situation, those broader patterns fed into the questions that everyone was left asking. What could have been done differently? What signs might have been overlooked? What systems could be put in place to prevent another family from experiencing this kind of loss? As the case moved into the legal phase, with charges filed against Nico Cotton and ongoing proceedings that would determine his judicial path, the community watched and waited. There was an expectation that justice would take its course, that prosecutors would present evidence, and that a jury would weigh what had been admitted and documented. In the end, Bre'Yon was remembered not for how his life ended, but for how it had begun, full of laughter, curiosity, and an unmistakable spark that touched everyone around him.
An update now on a story we brought you last night. A 21-year-old man named Nico Cotton is connected to Monday's death of 2-year-old Bre'Yon Wells in the Mark Twain neighborhood, has turned himself in to police. The boy's death was ruled a homicide after medical examiners found evidence the child was strangled. Police are now saying the suspect is charged with of that child. The child's family held a balloon release in his honor earlier tonight.
He had never had a bad day. Bre'Yon was the light of all of our lives, and he will greatly be missed, and we want to thank you all for your support.
In addition to the charges, the man is also being charged with second-degree murder. The investigation is ongoing.
A happy, laughing 2-year-old lost because trust was misplaced. And when we think about why it happened and what could be done to prevent another family from facing the same heartbreak, we are reminded that vigilance is not fear, but a responsibility we share. To protect the most vulnerable among us, and to honor the memory of a little boy whose time in this world was far too brief. And that brings us to the end of this case. What are your thoughts on this case? Let us know in the comments. If this story shook you, there's more on the channel that dives into cases just as haunting. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and share this video. It helps keep these stories from being forgotten. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.